To start. First of all, I want to thank everyone that's attending this evening for joining us in this critical and informative presentation on detoxing the spike protein. My name is Shonda Holt. I'm a former RN of 30 plus years, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight. And let me tell you, you are in really good hands. We are recording and know that the session will be available on the CanConnect website. So I wanted to give you a brief introduction of CanConnect19. Really, your first step starts here. CanConnect19 is a safe, supportive community for Canadians that are impacted by COVID-19 vaccine injuries. Here for those who've been alienated, misdiagnosed, forgotten, or unheard. We encourage you to join our Circle platform. It's a membership site for daily access to wellness partners that are experienced professionals like nutritionists, mental health experts, and medical practitioners who are ready to support and empower your healing journey. CanConnect19 members who have experienced injury are eligible to apply for a bursary to access in-depth healing sessions with a team of dedicated practitioners. If there's one thing that you take away from this evening's event, please let it be this: you are not alone. We are here to help. There's a whole team here to help. So you're welcome to reach out and connect at www.canconnect19.ca or email info@canconnect19.ca. We are incredibly honored to have the esteemed Dr. Wendi Roscoe presenting this evening. I cannot think of anyone more dedicated or better suited to enlighten, educate, and to help those who are suffering learn how to heal themselves. As the saying goes, the body was designed to heal itself. We just need to give it the right tools. And we are so blessed to have Dr. Wendi share her toolbox with us. So I wanted to give you a little background on the brilliant woman you'll be hearing from this evening. Dr. Wendi is passionate about feeling great, both mentally and physically, and understanding how the brain and body work together at their best. She has spent her life studying what fuels energy, focus, vitality, and long-term health, and she loves helping others achieve the same sense of well-being. Her extensive educational background allows her to understand how factors like diet, exercise, sleep, stress, inflammation, and the microbiome influence the body at the molecular, cellular, and physiological levels. So let me list off some of her education and credentials. She's got a Bachelor of Science, an honors degree in genetics, a master's in physiology and pharmacology, PhD in human physiology, a Bachelor of Education. She's a registered holistic nutritionist, nutritional genomics practitioner, and a live blood analyst. She has spent over 15 years conducting scientific research at the University of Western Ontario with several scientific publications, and taught biology, anatomy, and physiology at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario for 16 years. She is also the author of Human Biology, Anatomy, and Physiology for the Health Sciences, a textbook used in multiple colleges and universities across Canada. In addition to consulting in nutrition and lifestyle medicine, she continues to do independent and collaborative research in the areas of inflammation, hormonal balance, mood and energy, the gut microbiome, fasting and longevity, detoxification, and mitochondrial health. She currently does health research with Healing for the Ages and is a wellness partner with CanConnect19. Dr. Wendi shares a lot of information. She shares articles and videos to explore how we can support health at the deepest levels, and you can find her on YouTube. From cells and systems all the way to lifestyle and environment, she makes connections between science and daily life, showing how nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, Toxins, microbes, and supplements influence how your body performs and heals. Her goal? To help you understand your own biology so you can make empowered choices that support healing, balance, and vitality naturally. So make sure you check out Dr. Wendy's YouTube channel for more incredible information and resources. Now, I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Wendy so she can educate, enlighten, and give hope where many find themselves feeling lost, abandoned, and hopeless.
Thank you. Wow. That was an amazing intro. Thank you, Shonda. I'm very, very proud to be working with CanConnect and helping people to understand how their body is working, all the different factors that are affecting vaccine injury, shedding symptoms, long COVID, all of those things. And if any of you have heard me lecture before or teach or present before, I do like to dive into molecular and cellular functions because I think it's important to understand what's going on. So, number one, I'm not going to just give you a list of supplements. Here, take these 10 things and then you're going to be cured. It's not going to happen. I want to be able to explain what is happening to you at the cellular and molecular level so that you start understanding what is going on in your body. And then we're going to look at a myriad of things, not all tonight, but there's many, many different factors that are hugely important. And so tonight I'm going to focus on the spike protein. I'm going to focus on supplements and things that we can do that can help get rid of that. But first, I want to kind of talk about what is spike doing in our body. So we'll start sharing my slides. Okay. And hopefully you can see that. All right. Can we see the disclaimer slide? Okay, great. So this is education. I am not giving any medical advice. I only give specific directions to people that I work one-on-one with. I'm a little bit inundated lately, but if you join CanConnect, then I will be able to answer questions through that discussion site. We'll talk a little bit more about how to join and all of that at the end. So don't just go and start buying supplements that I talk about tonight. This is just about how do things work and what's going on. So this is not medical advice. This is education. So when we are looking at what we were told about the vaccine, we were told that there's a virus that has spike proteins on the surface. And if we can capture that spike protein on the surface, find the messenger RNA molecule that codes for that protein, package that into a lipid nanoparticle that will then be injected into the body, then cells will use that messenger RNA, make spike proteins, express them. The immune system will make antibodies that will then fight a future exposure to the spike protein on the virus in the environment. But most of us here today know that there's a little bit more involved than that. So, what was in the vaccines? A lot of different things have an impact on who is having post-vaccine syndrome or PVS and who is having more severe symptoms and why. There's so many different factors. A few of the things. One is the lipid nanoparticles. So the fact that this messenger RNA was packaged into a lipid ball, that means that it can directly enter all kinds of cells. Our cells are made of lipids. Our cell membranes are phospholipid molecules. So those lipid nanoparticles can easily enter the cells and they can bind to various receptors. So when the spike protein is accessible, it will bind to receptors, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But we also had a few extra things in this vaccine that most people were not planning for, and one of those is this plasmid DNA contamination. So a plasmid is a piece of DNA. It's a small circular plasmid, plasmid DNA molecule pictured over here that is normally expressed in bacteria. And researchers and scientists use these little things because they're easy to take out of bacteria, manipulate them, put them back in, bacteria can grow them, and we can get a lot of a gene. So these are commonly used in research. And they were used to produce the messenger RNA that was supposed to be in the vaccine. But this DNA plasmid contamination was not completely removed, even in the booster shots. And so now this DNA molecule is part of the contents of the lipid nanoparticles traveling to many cells in the body. So the biodistribution plays a significant role in all of the different symptoms that different people are feeling. So when we have this plasmid DNA that contains the spike gene, now we're not just talking about messenger RNA that'll degrade in a few hours or days or weeks. Now there's a gene that can potentially integrate into our genome. And this is my hypothesis, and I don't know this for certain, but we know that vaccine injured people are expressing high levels of spike proteins for years. It's been many years now, 3 or more years for most people since they've had this vaccine. So messenger RNA should have long degraded. There shouldn't be spike proteins anymore, because the fact that we still have these high spike protein levels shows that something unusual has occurred with this vaccine. The other thing is that these DNA plasmids could be broken down or fragments. So it's not even maybe entire spike proteins that are being formed. So there can be weird proteins. There can be misfolded proteins that are forming. And then we have the difference in, was there graphene oxide? Was there different ingredients in different batches? So there's a lot of information that we don't know about entirely what's going on with this vaccine. So I'm going to focus primarily on the spike protein, but I want to give you a little bit of hope, because it's not entirely unusual for our body, for Homo sapiens in, human evolution, to be exposed to foreign DNA, foreign proteins, and foreign lipids. Probably 8%, most estimates are that 8% of our current DNA is not human, and it comes from viruses and retroviruses. And they're permanently part of the human genome. And then every time we're infected with something, viruses go into the body, they get taken up by cells. We're taking up foreign DNA and RNA. And those viruses are making foreign proteins. And then even when we eat food, even natural, normal food, if you eat plants and animals, which is what we're supposed to do, there's going to be, we don't 100% digest everything in our digestive system. So we're always getting weird things in our body. Okay. And our body has ways to deal with this. There's 8 billion people on the planet. So we've been coping with lots of crazy, weird foreign things for a really long time, including toxins. And now, on top of this vaccine, we have new electromagnetic fields that we're dealing with. We have microplastic and forever chemicals. And, so there's a lot of things going on. But really, for the most part, the human body is quite resilient, and we do have physiological and cellular mechanisms for being able to deal with this stuff. Otherwise, the human race wouldn't even be here today. So that's why I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic that there's ways that we can deal with these things. An important aspect of how different supplements might be potentially beneficial is we need to know where the spike protein is in our body. So it's not just free floating and available in all of our cells for all of these supplements to just go in and attack it. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have vaccine injured today, but we do, because the spike protein, it can be free in the blood plasma. It can be floating through the circulatory system. That is the actual best way that we want it to be, because then there are certain supplements. I don't know why that just did that. There's certain supplements that would be able to target free spike proteins. But we also have spike proteins that are bound to receptors on cell membranes. So all of our cell membranes have these protein molecules, like in this picture here. This ACE2 receptor is a protein embedded into cell membranes, and then antigens or proteins or spike protein can bind to those receptors because they fit together. And when the spike protein is bound to a receptor or embedded into a membrane, it is not as easy to break down. So when we look at some of these supplements, we're not necessarily able to break down all of the spike proteins. Spike proteins can also be found inside the cytoplasm, which is the fluid inside of cells. So that lipid nanoparticle that distributed all throughout the body and getting inside of different cells, that can be in the cytoplasm and it can affect the organelles inside cells, like the mitochondria, that is an organelle that makes energy. And then it can be incorporated into exosomes. So exosomes is a whole live session all by itself. These are incredibly interesting molecules. They're not molecules. They're membrane-bound small vesicles that can contain spike proteins. And so people can actually sort of technically spread it around their own body. Our body makes exosomes to signal other cells. It's a kind of form of cell communication. So everything that is happening is a dynamic process. It's always changing. So where the spike proteins are is never exactly the same. So spike can also bind other receptors. So it binds the ACE2 receptor. I'm going to actually talk about that one in a little bit more detail in a second, because I think this is the primary one that is causing a lot of the symptoms, in addition to like the inflammatory reactions. But spike protein will also bind to nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. And this is part of our nervous system. So we have a cholinergic nervous system. The nicotinic receptors are actually named because because nicotine can bind these receptors. And I will talk about that. So when we have normal nicotinic acetylcholine receptor functioning, it helps to regulate neuroinflammation. And when spike binds to these particular receptors, it can cause symptoms like dysautonomia. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second as well. Spike can also bind to immune receptors called toll-like receptors. So this can have a huge impact on the inflammation pathways. So when we're blocking the immune system's normal ways of dealing with inflammation, there's certain times when we want inflammatory cytokines. We need to be able to attack microbes and pathogens. And then we need to calm that inflammatory reaction down and allow the tissues to heal. So when we can't have proper regulation of those inflammatory systems, then it can go haywire. And then that's when it's going to start damaging our own cells, which is the primary reason actually for most of the symptoms that people feel. It's our own immune system making these inflammatory cytokines that's causing the symptoms. And then there's the last receptor is neuropilin that facilitates entry into the cells. So when we're infected with a coronavirus, then the spike protein can bind to those receptors that helps the cell take it up. So it's not just binding to ACE2, but when it binds to ACE2, I think this is where the spike is having the most detrimental effects, because the normal pathway, so ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme, it's a carboxypeptidase enzyme. So that means a peptidase is an enzyme that breaks down proteins. Proteins are made of amino acids. A protein has a carboxyl end and an amino end. So this enzyme just simply means that it's breaking down a protein from the carboxyl end. So that's all that means. But it's a very important function so it's breaking down angiotensin 2, which is one of the molecules in this sort of complicated pathway. But the end result, the effects of the normal functioning of this enzyme, and when you think about what it normally does, you can start to imagine what are the symptoms you're going to feel if this doesn't happen naturally. So it normally dilates the blood vessels, vasodilation. So when this can't happen, you're going to have vasoconstriction and high blood pressure. It is also anti-inflammatory. So this is blocking our body's natural, this is only one of many ways that it causes inflammation. This normal pathway helps to reduce fibrosis. So a lot of vaccine injured have a lot of fibrotic tissue that is forming. It's anti-thrombotic. So a thrombosis is like a clot well, an embolism can move throughout the body or throughout the vascular system. And this angiotensin converting pathway helps to decrease clotting. And so when we block that normal pathway, then people end up having more clotting than they should. We have to have a balance of forming clots to protect us from damage and then breaking down clots so that we don't block blood vessels. Normally, it's cardioprotective. Normally, it decreases vascular permeability. This is a huge one. The vascular permeability factor. So that just means the blood vessels that make the lining, when that becomes leaky, then that means all kinds of things can come out of the vascular system and go into the tissues. And it can cross the blood-brain barrier. That means things can get from the bloodstream that normally wouldn't get into the brain parenchyma, like the tissue part of the brain where the neurons are. Normally, there's a blood-brain barrier. And when that becomes leaky, then all kinds of things can get into the area where the neurons function. Then that's going to affect things like cognitive ability, brain fog. People feel like they have dementia and you can't find your words. A little bit like me right now, but that's just nerves. But when we have vascular permeability, it affects all the tissues in our whole body. The other area where that's actually super important is in our digestive tract. And that can cause, wherever we have leaky vascular system, then things are just moving into tissues where they shouldn't. And then that's going to stimulate the immune system, and that's going to stimulate an inflammatory response, which then triggers symptoms with that tissue. Angiotensin also affects sodium regulation, which also affects blood pressure, and autoimmune. So when we decrease our ability to regulate the immune system, there's other reasons for the autoimmune stuff that also should be a live session all by itself, because there's reasons why there's more autoimmune situations going on with vaccine injured people. And so these ACE2 receptors are expressed almost everywhere in the whole body. The epithelial cells in the alveoli in the lungs. It affects the heart, the blood system, kidneys, intestines, brain, liver, gonads, like testes and ovaries. Also the mitochondria, which is the organelle inside the cells that makes energy. So if you have extreme fatigue, mitochondria are going to be playing a role in that. So now when we look at how do we help vaccine injured people and how do we help detox these spike proteins, and it's not just focusing on detoxing the spike proteins, but also all the other effects that are going on. Sometimes something else is going to be a priority. And how we look at how do we prioritize the best way to start helping people? So we have to think about all of the other factors that might be involved. So everybody has different needs based on where those lipid nanoparticles in the very beginning mostly distributed to. Also, here's a little glimmer of hope. When we look at pathological tissue samples where they're staining slides of sections of tissue like the spleen and the liver and the ovaries and the heart, and you look for spike protein distribution, a good thing in my mind is that not all the cells are affected. So the human body has 30 something trillion cells, and not all of them, 100% of our cells did not take up this lipid molecule. And it didn't integrate into all of those cells. So we have a lot of normal cells still, but different people are going to have symptoms based on certain tissues may have taken up more of the lipid nanoparticle or may have more integration, more spike protein production. So that's why some people are going to have more neurological effects and other people have more cardiovascular effects or cancer or infertility or whatever. And then there's genetics. So this is an interesting area that I would like to look more deeply into, but I have a hypothesis and I don't know if this is true yet, but I look at different genetic variants. So we have what we call SNPs or small nuclear polymorphisms. So we have about 20,000 different genes in our body on 46 chromosomes, and we have two copies of every gene. And because we got some of our DNA from our mom and some from our dad, right? So we have 23 and 23 chromosomes. So there's two copies of everything. And we can inherit different alleles or different variants of different genes. We're all different. So we're not just different in appearance, but we're different in molecules that have functions in our body. And so these three are examples that I think are significant when it comes to who tends to have more vaccine injuries or shedding symptoms or long COVID. And the MTHFR gene is the methylation gene. And so if you have certain variants of this gene, you have a decreased ability to methylate things. A methyl group is just a carbon and three hydrogens. And these are molecules that our DNA uses to regulate. We decrease transcription of things with methyl groups, and we convert amino acids with methyl groups. And so it's a really important way for some molecules to be activated or suppressed. And if we can't methylate properly, then we can't regulate things properly. And that includes being able to detoxify stuff. And then the other one is GST. So this is a glutathione um, enzyme that helps in the production of glutathione, which is our body's sort of master antioxidant, and it's our detoxification molecule. We need to be able to get rid of free radicals. So when we have an inflammatory reaction, when there's a foreign thing like a foreign spike protein, the immune system is going to freak out. And when it does, it makes these free radical molecules that don't just damage the foreign protein, it damages our own cells. And so we need glutathione to be able to neutralize that stuff. And some people have gene variants that allows them to be able to neutralize all kinds of things, and other people have a lesser ability to do that. So when we are unfortunately born with some of these genes, the DAO is diamine oxidase. That's about histamine. A lot of people have histamine reactions. Then we're going to have more effects when we have these different gene variants. But there's ways that we can support this. So if you know what gene variants you have or you suspect, you can tell from symptoms. I'll do a whole talk on that too. Then there's ways that we can deal with different gene variants. Predisposition. So some people have more symptoms in a certain area based on a, a, a health condition that may have existed before. So people that had cancer, for example, and then they went into remission, then the cancer reemerged after they got vaccinated, or people that had blood sugar dysregulation problems became diabetic, right? So there's different genetic predispositions. So this is going to affect the symptoms that different people have and the areas that we would need to focus on for different people. Dietary factors, so gut health, food sensitivities. Some people have oxalate problems. Some people can't eat protein. Some people can't eat plants. There's all kinds of variations in dietary factors that need to play a role when we're figuring out what kind of supplements, because diet is still a really huge component. And I'll actually talk about some of the free things that you can do that are good for everybody at the end. Lifestyle. So things like stress. Different people have like mega amounts of stress actually, and that would become a priority. So different factors are going to affect how we prioritize what kind of supplements are going to be the most important, right? So stress, if you can't sleep, sleeping is so hugely monumentally important. And if you can't sleep properly, then that is a huge stress on your body. Your body detects a lack of sleep as a mega stress. This is why you can get sick more easily if you don't get enough sleep for a few nights. EMF exposure is another huge one. And then toxin load. What other kind of toxic things are you exposed to? We're drinking plastic. If you're drinking tap water, that's probably something that you should consider thinking about. Getting a really good water filter. Um, Medications, any previous conditions or current conditions that require medications, we need to think about what supplements we take when we're on medications because there can be contraindications. So when I talk about the supplements in a little bit, don't just start taking stuff because if you're, for example, on an anticoagulant medication and then you start taking a whole bunch of proteolytic enzymes, that is going to be a conflict and that can cause issues. So we need to be careful when we're thinking about what supplements we're going to take. What stage of vaccine injury, gut microbiome health, dysbiosis. SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. If you have weird things growing in there or candida, like that is a huge issue for a lot of people that would need to be considered. Emotional stuff, what kind of symptoms you have. So there's a lot of things that we have to think about. And this is why my personal and hopefully CanConnect's number one thing is that there is no one single protocol. I can't give you a list of things that anybody can do. The whole reason why the vaccine was terrible was because not everybody in the world can do the same thing. And that also applies to how we treat things. So when we're looking at how we deal with the spike protein and the inflammatory stuff and everything that's going on, there are a lot of factors to consider. So we need to think about the nutrients that we're eating. We need to think about how to support our immune system. We need it to fight stuff and and be stimulated, but not overstimulated. Same with hormones, like every kind of endocrine control, like your thyroid hormones and your blood sugar and all of that. We need a happy balance. We need to be able to support our detoxification pathways, and that's what I will also mention. Stress is a huge thing. If you have mega amounts of stress, that would be a priority. You have to not be in fight or flight. That's also going to be a whole live session because there's so many physiological reasons why having mega amounts of stress actually prevents you from healing from anything, not just vaccine injury. Supporting your mitochondria, these little organelles inside of our cells that make energy. When they're affected, your whole entire body is affected. Avoiding other toxins, and then we want to be able to stimulate DNA repair. If we have weird DNA in our body, we need to be able to fix that. And our body is pretty smart and it knows how to do a lot of stuff. So I want to focus on the spike proteins and a few supplements and give you a little in-depth information about a few things, but I can't possibly cover everything in one session. So I made a little video. And I forgot to click something. I'm going to stop share for 1 second. And then, oh, there. So when I share, I want to be able to use, oh, it's not asking me about volume. Can someone, Garrett or somebody, when I want to play a video and I want the audio to come through, there's usually, oh, share sound. I found it. Okay, right. Oh, I'm not hearing it. It was just a pretty song. If you can't hear the audio, that's okay.
I won't sing to fill in the background for you, Wendy. I'll just save everybody.
Okay. Okay. So, whoop, it was probably the music was going to play that time. That's okay. So, all of those things on those slides I can talk about at some point in time, and there's all relevant. And I wish that I could talk about every single thing in one session, but it's not possible. So I want to focus on specifically how we can detoxify spike proteins. And I'm actually going to focus tonight on just the immune part, not even the lymphatic system, actually. We're just going to look at the immune system. And then I'm also going to talk just a tiny little bit about autophagy and proteosomes, because those are mechanisms inside the cells that help us get rid of crap. I put house analogy on here so I wouldn't forget to tell you like this idea. So thinking about how much is going on in your body. If you have vaccine injury and you have inflammation and you have spike proteins in your cells, on your cells, in your blood, in exosomes, you have inflammatory cytokines, you have autoimmunity, probably a little bit. There's probably cancer cells. There's a lot going on. And our body can deal with a lot of things, but we can't do it all instantly or even actually probably very quickly. So my house analogy is with autophagy. So just a quick little blurb about what autophagy is. This is when our cells get rid of damaged stuff. It can find damaged proteins, damaged cells, foreign proteins, weird things, misfolded proteins, stuff inside of our cells that shouldn't be there. And our body goes through this cleaning process, only under certain circumstances, though. If we eat all the time, we are essentially not going through that cleaning process. But not everyone should jump into big, giant, long fasts. Okay. So if you think about a house, and let's just suppose you're a pack rat and you have all kinds of stuff in cupboards and desk drawers and closets and stuffed under your bed and everywhere in your night table, right? You've got papers and books and garbage and wrappers and old stuff everywhere. You can't clean it all out in one day. You still have to go buy food and you still have to bring new things into your house, but you have to have garbage day. You have to have periods of time when you clean things out, and it takes time. So it takes time for our body to be able to clean things out. And you know that if you've ever cleaned out two cupboards in your kitchen and then you're like, I'm going to sweep under the fridge next week. Well, by the time you get to the fridge, the other cupboards are already dirty again. So there's a certain amount that we have to kind of keep on top of things. There's going to be a little bit of a curve where we have to work on things for a period of time until we get to a level where we can keep our house clean, even though we're probably still going to make spike proteins for a long time. There's a way that we can work on stuff. So we have a lot of ways our body can help deal with things. Our immune system is helping, our digestive system, our liver, our gut bacteria, our kidneys are flushing things out. Our skin, we can sweat out toxins. Our respiratory system, we're breathing things out. And then inside of our cells, we have organelles and proteosomes and enzymes and all kinds of things. Our body is actually supremely fully equipped to be able to deal with stuff. We just have to help it, and we have to do it in an organized, methodical way where we're doing more cleaning than taking on other garbage. So if we look specifically at what can possibly bind, block, or break down the spike protein. So these are the main things that I wanted to kind of focus on. And now, actually, before I get to this, I made a handout for you because I knew I would run out of time, but I really wanted to talk about those things. So when we're looking at supplements, and when we're looking at what can possibly bind, block, or break down spike protein, a lot of these studies have been done in vitro, which means like outside of the body. In vivo means it's been studied in animals or humans. In vitro means it's been studied in cells in a dish. And then we have also computer models now, which is called in silico. And so computers can look at the structure of proteins and they can figure out what it can possibly bind to. So that's what a lot of this is based on. So it doesn't mean there's hardcore human evidence that this is all going to work, but there's decent evidence that these things can affect spike protein in some way. And so also a lot of the research will look at like the infectious virus and not necessarily the vaccine spike, but hopefully they correlate. So Shonda has a handout that she'll put in the chat, and this is summarizing some of the most important or the kind of key, most common supplements that are being used that can help deal with spike proteins. And so I made a handout because then you would just have it and you don't have to worry about like writing down details. So in the handout, I talk about if there's a natural source for things. Some things you can actually get naturally in decent amounts and it would be really good and you don't have to like go buy a supplement. I also talk about the mechanism of action, like what is it doing? And this is in the it's mostly general, but it can either bind the ACE2 receptor or it blocks spike, or it can like potentially break down or digest the spike protein. What are the common doses? There's a range of common doses. Again, this isn't medical advice, this is education. And then there's cautions. And some supplements, we have to consider other factors, and we don't just go buy 20 things and start taking stuff, right? Because it depends on all those factors I talked about earlier. And then I have a few references about some of the things that are potentially able to bind spike proteins. So if you want to download that form and then you can browse through it later. So I'll go through a few things. So yeah, I'm just gonna pull that up just to make sure I don't miss anything. So with the proteolytic enzymes, okay, so there's a few things that I wanted to highlight about the enzymes. And proteolytic enzymes, it just means that they are enzymes that will break down proteins. And most of these are going to function in the vascular system, in your bloodstream. And so we have to, when we're taking proteolytic enzymes, because they're proteins, enzymes are proteins. And normally when we eat proteins, we digest them. And if you take these enzymes with food, you'll digest them. And then they'll just be amino acids, they'll just be protein and they won't work. But if you take these enzymes on an empty stomach, it has to be very empty, like nowhere near eating food. So first thing in the morning is usually good. Or if you finish eating your last meal early and you stay awake for at least 3 hours, you could do it at nighttime too. But you want these enzymes to stay whole and then they can absorb into your bloodstream. Now, these enzymes are not going to get into your cells and they're not going to break down spike that's bound to receptors. So this is going to be more effective for people that have clotting problems or vascular issues because these enzymes also do a lot of really important things in the vascular system, like breaking down fibrin. So fibrin is that protein that is basically made, or well, okay, so our liver makes a protein called fibrinogen, and then the platelets, little pieces of cells inside of our vascular system, when tissue damage happens, they become activated and they will convert that fibrinogen into fibrin, and it makes all these stringy strands and it forms a clot. And so blood clots are generally composed of red blood cells and fibrin. Well, these enzymes can break down those microclots. And it can also break down amyloid. So there's some ideas that potentially some of the weird kind of calamari clots that the embalmers are finding that are actually in some living people There's probably an amyloid component, and some of these enzymes can break down the amyloid. So even though it's not getting to spike protein throughout your tissues, they can do a lot of beneficial things in the vascular system. If you have a lot of clotting stuff going on, then these would be more beneficial. Um, so it can decrease platelet viscosity, and they can, in vitro, nattokinase can dissolve spike proteins. But again, this is free spike proteins, not spike proteins that are embedded in other places. And then serrapeptase I added, even though this can't technically break down spike protein, it hasn't been shown to break down spike protein, but it also can break down fibrin clots. It can break down biofilm, which can form in the digestive tract, in the colon, if you have an overgrowth of different bacterial organisms or fungal organisms like Candida. Getting rid of biofilm is really good because if you have a lot of biofilm buildup, it can be hard to absorb nutrients. It can break down amyloid in rats. It can also decrease inflammatory molecules. So remember, the underlying issue with having all of this spike protein in our bodies is that the immune system is constantly overreacting. And it's the immune system's cytokine molecules that are causing damage to our tissues. So things that help the immune system calm down are going to be beneficial. So serrapeptase and bromelain are really great at reducing inflammatory cytokines. And if we do that, that's going to help the whole body. That's not going to help just the vascular system. So even though these enzymes are likely only digesting spike proteins in your blood vessels, the other effects are still helping your whole body. So bromelain, this is the molecule in pineapple, in the pineapple cores. If you ever eat pineapple, keep the cores and juice it. You know, you get tons of bromelain in there, and that's really great. Nattokinase comes from fermented soy, so be careful. If you're allergic to soy or you react to soy, then you shouldn't take nattokinase. The other thing is that with these enzymes, you want to, because they're essentially breaking down clots, you want to make sure that you're not bruising. So be careful that if you just kind of tap your arm and then you end up with a giant bruise, then you have too much of this going on and you need to decrease. Also, if you're taking anticoagulant medications, then you're going to be at a higher risk of bleeding if you also then add in proteolytic enzymes. So be careful about that. Um, so serrapeptase comes from bacteria, and lumbrokinase is another one that comes from earthworms, actually. And this one is really great because it actually stimulates plasminogen activating factor, which normally our liver makes plasminogen that is converted into plasmin that counters fibrin. So in a normal healthy person, we make fibrin when we need to, and then we make plasmin and we get rid of it. And we're always kind of living in this healthy balance. But if we have too much clotting and too much fibrin, then stimulating plasminogen activating factor would be beneficial. And then papain comes from papaya, and these are also, these don't break down spike proteins, but they are anti-inflammatory. And sometimes when you buy concoctions or mixtures of proteolytic enzymes, then papain would be in there. So how do they get absorbed? I won't spend too much time on this, but basically you need to take these on an empty stomach, and only about 40% is going to be absorbed. So this is why when you take proteolytic enzymes, it's not going to function perfectly immediately. It's something that you have to take for a period of time. I would say you would need at least 3 weeks. So if you're one of those people that's kind of trying lots of different supplements, try it, oh, it didn't work after 3 days and throw it away and try something else. With the enzymes, you really want to give it a go for a while. And it's not going to be something that you will necessarily feel right away, but the mild effects over a period of time, I would say, is more beneficial than taking like really harsh medications. But sometimes you need medications. So everybody's situation is different. But we can absorb these. And this is one of my most exciting things that happened this last week. So one of my clients has a lot of vascular stuff, a lot of clotting, probably amyloid clots, and a lot of blood flow problems. And we started working with proteolytic enzymes on March 27th. This is what her blood looked like right before she started doing the enzyme. So after this live blood analysis appointment, her red blood cells were all in rouleau. They were all clumped up, and you can see there were microclots everywhere. And all of these fibery things that you can see in here, hopefully it shows up on the monitor. Um, these are fibrin networks everywhere. Her blood was crazy. We cried. But then on May 26th, we cried again because it was so great. So after 2 months, this is her blood, and it's very, very clear. There's a few microclots, but it's not insane. And so this is wonderful. And she's feeling better. And I'm like, I'm so super happy. So this wasn't the only supplement. She's also doing minerals and omega-3 and some vitamin D and a few other things. Also on a few medications. So again, everybody is different, but this is very exciting. It's exciting to be able to see the effects in the microscope. So then a few other, I'm conscious of time. So a few other flavonoids, and I'll do, or supplements. I'll do this really quickly because I did give you the handout, but some others that are really beneficial for multiple reasons. Quercetin, it can potentially block the spike ACE2 binding interaction. It can also act like a zinc ionophore, which means it'll help zinc get into the cells that the immune system needs to be able to function. It can act like a good antiviral. So if you're getting sick, kind of one of my my favorite concoction, if you're getting sick, vitamin C, vitamin D, quercetin, and zinc, like those are like really amazing. Activates NRF2. This is a molecule I'm going to talk about a lot if you join CanConnect and you come to lots of things. This is our master detox system. This molecule, anything that activates NRF2 and proteasomes and autophagy is going to help your body get rid of stuff. It's going to help you clean your house. And then we can find a lot of this. Red onions have a lot. If you ever make soup or stew, put the skin in there too and then pick it out later. Let all that nice quercetin get in there. And capers. Capers actually have a ridiculous amount of quercetin. So you can eat like a tablespoon and end up with like 40 milligrams, which is pretty cool. Luteolin is found in like colorful vegetables and some herbs like parsley and chamomile, and the amounts are low. It would only be a few milligrams, but if you're, in general eating healthy foods on an ongoing basis and you're getting rid of packaged foods that have no polyphenols and micronutrients, then over time you're going to have a significant amount of good things in your body that's beneficial. So this can apparently bind the spike receptor binding domain. It also acts like an antioxidant, really good for, neuroprotection, can stabilize mast cells. So if you have histamine stuff, if you have itching, mucus, runny nose, allergy kind of stuff, quercetin and luteolin are both amazing for decreasing the histamine kind of reactions. And then NAC. So I want to talk about NAC and acetylcysteine. So this supplement is actually it's a synthetic molecule. So it's derived from a normal amino acid called cysteine, and they add an acetyl group. And this molecule is actually super amazing for denaturing spike proteins. But again, it is going to be the free spike proteins, not the ones that are bound to membranes or inside cells or inside exosomes. And the other amazing thing about NAC is that it is the precursor, cysteine is a precursor molecule to producing glutathione, that mega awesome antioxidant that gets rid of free radicals. And it's neuroprotective, it helps your mitochondria, it helps you chelate heavy metals. So NAC is really good. But I wanted to just make a quick note about the augmented NAC. I have a couple of issues with that, but if anybody has ever used the augmented NAC and had benefits, throw it in the chat. I'm curious, I'd like to know. Because so this is what NAC looks like. This is what the molecule looks like. This is the most functional part of NAC. It has a thiol group, which is a sulfur and a hydrogen. And when we have augmented, so the website says that the subatomic particles are aligned and organized and it makes it more effective. And they say that it can break down like 98% of spike proteins. But I'm not sure how much I believe that because most of the spike protein isn't free. It's bound, and when it's bound, it can't really be denatured. So the way that this one is working, this is a picture of the S1 domain of the spike protein. And when we have NAC with those sulfur groups, it can disrupt the sulfur bridges in the spike protein. So the sulfurs like each other and they'll bind to each other. It's a type of molecular interaction that holds proteins in their conformational shape along with other things. And the sulfurs make the spike really stable. And NAC can disrupt that. It can reduce it like a redox reaction, oxidation and reduction. So when it does that to a free spike protein, then it changes its shape and now it can't bind to anything. Now it can't affect the ACE2 receptor or the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. And so this is a really, really good thing. But again, because most of the spike isn't free unless we start doing some autophagy stuff. Okay, I'm going to speed along because I gave you the handout. I'm going to skip these for now, but these are all like really, really commonly important molecules. And melatonin, I must say, just try sleeping. Try decreasing the amount of blue light and making sure that, you have a circadian rhythm because natural melatonin is amazing. It does amazing things. It doesn't just make you sleep, it supports everything. So, and then I wanted to give a quick note to these two things. So, nicotine can benefit people that have neurological effects from the spike proteins because it competes for the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. And it can be very beneficial for people with the neurological stuff, with brain fog, extreme fatigue, and cognitive, all of that kind of stuff. And also for people with a dysautonomia. So this is when the autonomic nervous system is not regulated and you can't regulate your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your body temperature, and you feel faint, but your heart rate goes up and your blood pressure is all over the place. That stuff can actually benefit from nicotine. And a common dose is 7 milligrams. But if people buy the 21 milligram patches, then you cut it in 3 pieces. It's cheaper. You can make it last longer. And a lot of people with neurological stuff have had benefits of that. Some caveats with that, though, is it can be stimulating. And if you have anxiety or insomnia, it might not be the best idea. And then ivermectin, I would say 30-ish% of people that take ivermectin have huge benefits because it can potentially block spike from binding ACE2 and it has some anti-inflammatory effects. Don't take it if you're doing calcium channel blockers. There's interactions there. And so what I have talked about is how we can break down spike and how we can decrease the inflammatory response. And a lot of the effects are when spike is not bound to things. But most of the spike is actually bound to receptors or embedded in membranes. So how do we deal with that? And this is maybe potentially my next topic or one of the next topics, but autophagy and proteosomes, this is our intracellular detoxification process. So there's lots of really cool things that we can do to promote those normal mechanisms. One of the most common ways is fasting or time restricted eating. There's too much to talk about right now, and don't just go do a 3-day fast because you release toxins, you can make things worse. If you're already, intermittent fasting, then you're good with it, then keep doing it. It's very, very beneficial. If you're not used to it, start with just having an eating window of 10 hours a day and then try to expand that over time. Other things that can promote this, that promote the AMPK molecules and the NRF2 and the sirtuins and all those good things that help us get rid of the bad stuff, help us clean out our house. That's going to be exercise, but only as much as you can tolerate. You can overdo it. If you exercise too much, you're going to make cortisol and you're going to have increased inflammation. So you always have to listen to your body and you push yourself just to the perfect magical amount and don't overdo it. Heat therapy, sitting in a sauna, cold therapy, cold showers or cold plunges. Stress is huge. Get enough sleep, super important. And then there's a bunch of supplements that you can take that will help activate that AMPK pathway without needing to do long fasts. If you're in a situation where you're undernourished and you can't fast, there's still things that you can do that can promote that process. And so, in closing, don't underestimate all of these normal things that are free and super amazing. Healthy food, eat plants and animals, have clean water, get sleep, reduce exercise, meditate. Here's a challenge. Try to, so I'm going to stop sharing. Try to spend 10 minutes a day doing nothing. Just sit somewhere and look out the window. Don't think, don't plan, don't think about your to-do list, don't talk, don't watch anything, don't do anything, don't read anything. Just exist for 10 minutes a day. And that actually is probably better than a lot of supplements because you're going to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is where we need to be for our body to do a lot of its own normal natural processes. And so I'm already past the hour, so I'll leave it there. My goal was 45 minutes, but
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy. That was amazing. Uh, and I have a bunch of questions. So why don't we, if people have questions, we're going to take them out of the chat. So throw them in the chat. I've been collecting all the questions that have been posted so far. So let's go through some of these. And we're going till half past the hour, correct? I just want to make sure. Okay.
yeah, we
So,
can go like a few minutes beyond, like if needed. So, but
okay.
generally, yeah, 8:30.
So we're going to start with the first few questions that came out were when you were talking about detoxification. So would it be helpful to start detoxing with a parasite detox first?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So when we talk about parasites, that also includes Candida and which is a fungus, which is not technically like a parasite in the scientific term, but we call things that shouldn't be there parasites. And same with SIBO, having bacterial overgrowth or aspergillus or any of those kinds of things, then yeah, those are all kind of technically parasites in the sense that they're living in us and they shouldn't be there. And it is very beneficial. The thing that I would caution is people that have Crohn's or colitis. Um, Sometimes people with Crohn's and colitis can't take probiotics because their immune system reacts to it. Like celiac reacts to gluten, right? Or, you don't have to be celiac to react to gluten. Lots of people do. But if you can't replace your gut microbiome, you want to be careful about which anti-parasitic things that you take because you don't want to wipe out all kinds of good stuff too. So there's like for candida, for example, I find that caprylic acid and grapefruit seed extract are good because they'll kill candida and they won't bother your normal microbiome. But something like oregano oil, which is great if you put it in your mouth if you have a throat infection. But if you put it in water and gulp it to like kill stuff in your gut, that'll also kill good bacteria. So but definitely in general, doing an anti-parasite cleanse is a great idea. And getting rid of biofilm. And the proteolytic enzymes, so the nattokinase, serrapeptase, bromelain, those, if you do those, they will also work on biofilm and gut organisms that shouldn't be there. And if you throw in a little mimosa pudica, then you like poop out biofilm and you only need to do it for a few days. It's kind of awesome.
It always turns to poop. Anytime you talk about health and nutrition. Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. Uh, is there a role for glutathione in detox?
So glutathione, taking it as a supplement, it's actually not super effective. It's better to help your body make its own. And so you can do liposomal glutathione and you'll get a little bit more, but it won't necessarily get too much further than your vascular system. So if you want to like get it into your brain or your other tissues, then NAC is probably the better pathway. You can also nebulize, like breathe it in, and that can help if you have respiratory inflammation. If you have a lot of respiratory stuff going on, then breathing it can help that because you're going to kind of get it there directly.
Awesome. So is there a way to detox on an ongoing basis due to possibly ongoing mRNA exposure in our environment for somebody who's not vaxxed?
Yeah. So I think that there's a bunch of things that we can do on a regular basis. Number one, time restricted eating. Eat in a window of time. If you can get yourself to 8 hours a day and then fasting 16 hours a day, you're not decreasing your calories. You're still eating everything that you need. You're just doing it in a smaller window of time. And there's been a lot of research that shows if we're looking at how much our body can detoxify stuff, fasting is still the number one way to stimulate those autophagy processes. So if we have 16 hours a day, that's kind of like back to my house analogy. That's like dusting and cleaning. You're doing the dishes and sweeping the floor. You're not cleaning out the back of the cupboards or the basement when you're fasting 16 hours a day, but you're keeping things generally clean. The surface of your house looks generally good. If company came over, it would be okay. But if you want to like clean out the cupboards, then you need to do longer fasts. And then the kind of magic window is between 36 and 72 hours. And you have to gauge how much of that you need, potentially once a month. Even a 48-hour once a month is going to be super great if
Yeah,
your body can handle it. Yeah.
I can handle it. I got into fasting reading the physician who got into fasting because he injured himself and he healed a physical ankle injury by fasting. I think fasting is amazing and you know so much more about it than I do, but I think it's nice that it's coming out more in a lot of communities, but you have to be safe with it too. To know.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a question about genetic testing and if genetic testing can be done via blood work. I don't.
So actually on my website, I am a nutrigenomics practitioner, so I can order the kits through nutrigenomics and they look at 77 different genes and it's actually really cool. Like you can see, should I be a vegan? Should I be a carnivore? Should I exercise by running marathons or should I lift weights? Should I maybe vitamin D supplements are bad for me. Like there's all kinds of things that you can learn from those, and that includes the gene mutations that I talked about, the methylation, histamine, the glutathione stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in there. It's
Awesome.
expensive, unfortunately, and I can't control that. That's just how much it costs because you would get the kit, you can order it through me, you get the kit, you do a swab, mail it off, I get the results, and then I can go through it with you.
Yeah, awesome. Another question. Is IBS diverticulitis a side effect of the shots?
I think anything can be exacerbated by the shots. And definitely, there's a lot of gut stuff. I've seen a lot more leaky gut, intestinal permeability, inflammation, food sensitivity stuff in the last few years, like beyond belief. Like pre-COVID, I would rarely see people, that had gut stuff, and now it just seems to be all the time, even unvaxxed people. So there's definitely something going on. I mean, there's also other toxins, right? Like we can't completely blame everything on the vaccines, although it's tempting. But there's also a lot more electromagnetic fields than we've ever been exposed to before, and that also has a huge effect on our gut. So I would say another thing that you shouldn't underestimate is grounding, walking outside barefoot. Like it's actually one of the main things that I do. And people in CanConnect that have heard me talk before, sometimes I get electromagnetic frequency issues when I'm presenting, and I like as soon as I ground or go outside in the winter, I would go out in my greenhouse and take my shoes off and stand on the ground, and it like just decreases like inflammatory stuff. It's one of the fastest and most amazing things for helping, like we can get electrons from the earth that balances free radicals, and it's just so important. In the summer, I'm always a gazillion times healthier. I'm not as stuffed today because I walked around outside today.
And Wendy, I've been trained in the natural health realm as well, uh, many programs, and I always poo-pooed that until I saw your presentation on it. And I've been walking outside barefoot every day.
Good, good.
Uh,
Before, like, there's a few things that I like just started feeling like, it wasn't really on my top 10 list before, but now it like totally is. And grounding is one of them. Before I was like, grounding, earthing, that sounds a little woo-woo, I didn't really think there was anything to it. And then I started like reacting to Wi-Fi and stuff. And so I took a deep dive into EMF, and it's amazing. Like there's mega physiological evidence for grounding.
yes, yes, and I'm all for doing anything that costs nothing.
Yeah.
It's free. Let's do it, right? Okay. Is there an effect of Ozempic on detox?
So Ozempic, it affects basically your blood sugar. So that's a GLP inhibitor. Basically, that's a hormone that helps you feel full. And so you don't eat as much. And so yeah, it's kind of connected because when you overeat, especially if you have stress and then you eat junk food, because then you want potato chips and ice cream and whatever, then you're going to be getting too many calories. You're probably eating outside of your healthy eating window. And so things that decrease your appetite would theoretically be beneficial. However, I kind of feel like the problem with things like Ozempic and GLP inhibitors is that it doesn't only affect your appetite. What it also does, and drugs always kind of have a side effect, and the side effect is that it slows down the whole digestive process. And some people, when they take something like Ozempic for a period of time, can end up with what's called gastric paralysis. And it slows it down so much that it doesn't work. And then people will eat something and then they vomit because it won't go through. And so I would be very cautious about taking drugs like that.
Okay. There's a question here, and I think this whole presentation answers this, but how do you stop the ongoing propagation of the mRNA, the spike proteins that just keep.
Yeah. And that's really difficult. And that is about how much integrated, if it's integrating. I mean, in my mind, it's the only logical reason why people 3 or 4 years later would still have really high spike levels. The body has to be making it. And so we can't really just go into our cells and extract it. We have to help our cells know when to get rid of stuff. So, okay, so basically, when our cells become damaged, if there's foreign things in our cells, our body has this sort of process of it's called ubiquination, where weird things get tagged. We have molecules that are like kind of like little security guards that are like, wait a minute, you're not normal, and it puts a little tag on it, and then ubiquinated things are have a flag on them now, and now other parts of the cell know that it should get broken down. And so that goes along with the autophagy, the AMPK, the sirtuins, the NRF, like those weird words, those things, if we can help promote those things, then it helps our cells know when there's foreign stuff that needs to either be broken down within the cell or the whole cell has to be broken down. We have a process called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. When a whole cell is completely mutated beyond fixing, we kill it, right? That's what we do with cancer cells all the time. And then the other side of it too is our immune system. I really think another important live session would be how do we stimulate the immune system in a good way? We want the immune system to be activated enough to know when to get rid of stuff, but not so activated that it's inflammatory and autoimmune. And that's really important too. So things that naturally promote healthy immune function is going to be really important because the immune system, when we look at that slide where I had, the detoxification organs, the immune system is really key for finding weird stuff and getting rid of it. And I think, okay, so also when we look at tissue samples where spike protein is labeled and there's only like, you know, 20, 10, 20, 30% of the cells that are actually expressing spike, then that means there's a lot of normal cells still. And over time, I think if our body, we can keep picking away at those damaged cells every time we do a 48-hour fast, aim for once a month. And then over time, you're cleaning out a different cupboard of your house every month, and it will just gradually decrease. And then usually, the healthier cells are going to be the most likely to replicate new cells. So I'm still optimistic. I think it's possible.
I think our bodies are pretty amazing. Um, I know we like to simplify things so that people can understand how our bodies work, but our bodies are incredibly amazing at some very intricate things that they do to heal. And unfortunately, we all get a little anxious when it takes time,
Yeah,
but that's the culture we live in. We're not in a pop a pill culture. This is now we have to come back to the culture of good things take time.
yeah.
Things take time. Okay. Is there a difference between spike proteins acquired from the vaccine versus spike proteins uh, from shedding
Yeah, so
or from
that's a
the
good
or
question.
from infection,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So the vaccine spike is slightly different. I think if David Speaker is on here, he would know the exact differences, but there's like a proline or like some amino acid that's different. It's a very small change, but it is enough of a change that we should technically be able to sequence them both and then see the difference. How they function in the body, are they different? I don't know. It's hard to say. So like a lot of these studies where it says, it can bind to the spike binding domain, we're assuming that when they're looking at the spike from the virus, that it will be similar to the spike from the vaccine. But I don't know if we know that 100% because, of course, they're not doing those experiments. They don't want us to know that information.
Yeah, they don't want to know. Okay, there's a few questions on lab testing. So, is there a test for fibrin amyloids? I'm going to combine that with, is there sort of the top 5 blood tests that someone should be requesting through their GP?
Yeah, so I have I wrote a few down. So there's a few inflammatory molecules that okay, so this is the thing. So a lot of doctors are unable to do things that are, outside of their scope. If they're a general practitioner in a walk-in clinic or whatever, they can't do certain things. And so sometimes you need a specialist. But if we look at some of the blood tests that are the most normal things that doctors should be able to do, let me put this up. So these inflammatory markers, these are all elevated. I'm not sure if they can measure NF-kappa B. This is a kappa, like a Greek symbol. Um, this is hugely affected in vaccine injured. Um, IL-6 and TNF-alpha, these are all very pro-inflammatory cytokines that are high in most vaccine injured people. And if we can measure those, that would be really excellent to be able to gauge the change in those as you do things, right? Healthier lifestyle, relax and, sleep and get physically active and all those normal things. Don't underestimate those. And then, adding in supplements and trying things. Most of the time, they will look at CRP, which is C-reactive protein. But that's not the best indicator, actually, of inflammation. So when they do normal blood work and they do like a normal CBC and a white blood cell and look at your TSH, but not the T3 and T4, and they have their ways, then a lot of people come back and say, my blood work is perfect. How come I'm dying when nothing is wrong, right? So it's part of the gaslighting. So they look at CRP, but it's actually not the best thing to look at. Another one that they should be able to do, a little arm twisting maybe, is ESR, which is erythrocyte sedimentation rate. That will be increased with inflammation. Oh, another thing, LDLs. So when you have a lipid panel, they're using this increase in LDLs to say people should be on statin drugs, but LDLs naturally increase when you have inflammation. So you don't need a statin to decrease normal, healthy, low density lipoproteins. You need to decrease the inflammation that's causing the increase. So look at LDLs, but the best indicator of cardiovascular issues is the triglycerides. It's not even the LDLs. So that also can be a whole talk.
Oh my gosh, the whole thing about cardiac markers and your lipid panel is
Yeah.
been very, very interesting in the research and how they were paid off for their results. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
Yeah, we
whole
still we
can of
still
worms.
follow them. Okay.
Um,
We-
D-dimers. Oh, and then another one that you should always try to do that a normal doctor can do is homocysteine. You want to look at your homocysteine. If that's really high, you might have the MTHFR SNP. And then some will do antibody spike levels, but not all of them will admit to being able to do that.
So I know there's people on here in Alberta, and I did try to get a spike antibody test, and you cannot in Alberta. You need to have it ordered by an immunologist. So every province is going to be different on how they allow these tests to be ordered. Okay, let's see if we just have, I'm going to do one more question, unless you're okay to go. I don't want to go take advantage of you, Wendy. And we
That's
have
okay. Yeah,
lots of calls in the future to do. So, um,
I had one slide I was I was curious about. Let me just put up one more thing. I'm curious about those of you still here. Um, what topics you would be interested in more information about? I threw a lot out there tonight because more people registered honestly than I expected, and so then I tried to cram more in. But over time, I would like to focus more deeply on certain things in a very kind of systematic way to help you grow an understanding over a period of time, because it's not possible to just throw out a bunch of information in one presentation. These are some things that I think are really important. Whatever is kind of jumping out at you, or anything from my talk that you heard that you're like, oh, I want to know more about that, put it in the chat and I'll read it later and I'll kind of compile stuff. The whole autophagy, AMPK, like fasting, apoptosis, all that stuff is important. Leaky gut, huge. Food sensitivities, histamine, all kinds of crap, increasing inflammation, getting through your gut, autoimmunity, the whole exosome thing, your parasympathetic nervous system stress response, super important. You can't heal if you're in fight or flight. Mast cell activation, huge. An anti-inflammatory diet. We can do all kinds of stuff about food. When you have weird things that you can and can't eat, we can come up with ideas, and that would be really great, that are cheap and affordable and healthy. I think that would be a really good one. How do we tell or help ourselves repair DNA? You know, when we have all this damage, we got to fix DNA mutations, not just from the jabs, but from EMF and plastic and, heavy metals and stuff. Then, we can look into each body system, the nervous system, digestive system, liver, fertility, like the brain, all kinds of stuff. Mitochondria, this is a huge one that I want to do as well, all about energy, any other topic. So, while we're kind of just going through the last question, whatever kind of interests you, throw it in the chat. I'm curious.
Yeah, the chat's going nuts. So that's awesome. It's always
Cool.
good to be able to provide what people are actually looking for. So it's good for to have that information. Okay. So the I'm trying to look at the chat's going nuts now, so I'm gonna go back a little bit. I think there was some questions on a little bit more information. Why don't we do this? There was a question about zeolite.
Yeah.
Um, and infrared sauna. Can you just touch on those, and then we'll take the rest of the questions and use them going forward.
Okay. So when we're talking about heavy metals and chelating heavy metals, some of the main things are zeolite, EDTA, fulvic acid, and humic acid. Those are the main things. But then there's also binders and things. So now when we're talking about that stuff, now the liver is involved because we're pulling things out of the bones, fat cells, and other tissues. Now it's in circulation, and now we're going to start having inflammatory reactions if we do that kind of thing too quickly. And also those things can pull normal metals, normal minerals like potassium and magnesium and zinc and copper and all those things that we need, and we can end up excreting those. So mineral replacement is really important when you're doing any of this stuff. There's some controversy about zeolite and EDTA, but in general, if the products are safe, then they're effective. And there's different ways that you can do it. You can do IV EDTA, but in general, I think zeolite is a mild, long-term kind of chelator, and you're less likely to have side effects and symptoms. You're not as likely to overchelate too quickly with something like zeolite. Usually it's a spray and you just put it under your tongue and it'll absorb. But also another thing to think about when you're going to chelate stuff, you need to have binders and things. So then your liver is involved. Your liver puts waste products in the bile that goes into the digestive tract. When you eat fat, bile helps you digest fat, but it also contains garbage, okay? That becomes a dumping ground. And so you need to make sure you're pooping every day. We're back to poop. You got to go every day. If you're constipated and then your liver is chelating stuff and goes into your digestive tract, it'll just reabsorb. So it's really important to make sure your bowel movements are good and then you're eating a lot of fiber. You could also do something like activated charcoal, where it'll hold on to the toxic stuff until you poop it out so it doesn't reabsorb back into your bloodstream. Otherwise, you're just going to be in this weird, cycle. So that also chelation is a whole topic, but that's just kind of my two cents.
Awesome. I just want to thank you so much, Wendi. The chat is just going crazy on how thankful people are and how amazing we all think you are, because you are. And we really
Aw.
appreciate you giving us your time and your wisdom and your knowledge. I always learn from you. And so I'm excited for what's to come in the future on what you're going to share. So, in closing, I just want to thank everyone for attending this informative and enlightening event. What you've experienced this evening is just one example of the incredible and potentially life-saving information that you will benefit from at CanConnect19. At this time, these events are going to be held on a monthly basis. However, based on need, desire, and support, we aim to increase the frequency of these events. At CanConnect19, we have an incredible circle platform where you can communicate and engage. And I know the links have been going in the chat, so I'm going to ask that somebody continue to post those links on where people can join that circle group. You get to engage with other individuals who have been injured by the COVID injections. It's an amazing community, and we're just getting started. So if we think it's amazing now, just imagine what it's going to be a month from now, 2 months from now, as we grow and connect and get to support each other. You're going to find unconditional support and understanding, which we know we're not finding elsewhere in the healthcare communities. You'll also benefit from research and resources on the platform, not the least of which is access to our incredible and knowledgeable wellness partners. And I know Joanne Mulhall is on this call. Wendi is a wellness partner there. I'm in there. We have some nurses and some nurse practitioners and some mental health support in there as well. Whether you're seeking knowledge, guidance, resources, or just a sense of community, because how many people are feeling really isolated in all of this, right? Don't look any further. CanConnect is here, and we're here to help. Please ensure that you have taken the links that have been popped in the chat and any contact information that if you want to reach out to CanConnect19 in an email or pop into the Circle CanConnect19 group. Should you miss something, don't despair. We're going to follow up with an email to all attendees that will include all of the relevant information and contact from tonight's presentation. I want to also address the one question that came up in the chat, which was how can we work with you with Wendi? Wendi is at capacity right now for clients, so there is a wait list. So the best way you can connect and get some help is joining CanConnect. Get in there, utilize and listen to the recordings that are in there already, and the ones that are to come on our on the live calls. And we also have Joanne Mulhall is another one of our natural health practitioners. So definitely we can connect you with her. So thank you again for taking time is precious, and we really appreciate that you joined us tonight. And we hope to see you in the Circle community and at future CanConnect19 events. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Great presentation.